Buenas tardes. How's everybody doing today? Welcome, welcome, welcome. I know I'm getting excited. We're close to spring break. Spring break is next week. I can't wait. It's been a long time between winter break and spring break, so I'm looking so forward to it. If you're going to be doing anything interesting for spring break, why don't you put that in the comments? Let us know in the chat what you're planning on doing. I am going to be resting up and getting ready for some presentations I've got to do and for going to Mitten CI at the end of April. So I'm looking forward to going to Michigan and taking part in that. But I got a lot of prep work to do, so I'll be using my spring break to do that. At least it'll give me some time away from the classroom so that I can get some other stuff done. So today we're going to be talking about write and discuss, which is one of my favorite activities. And we'll get started with that in just a moment. For those who are just tuning in and don't know who I am, my name is Scott, and you are watching Immediate Immersion Live, where we are all about comprehension-based instruction in the modern language classroom. And we'll be right back. And welcome back, everybody. Thank you for staying tuned. Again, we're going to be talking about write and discuss, which is one of my favorite activities. And I believe the person who invented it and coined the term was a woman by Susie Gross. She is one of my mentors. She was an amazing Spanish and French teacher at the middle school. She's been retired for many years now. And retired from presenting and participating in our community. But she is an amazing woman, and I've learned so much from her. So we're going to talk about this great activity and how you can use it in your classroom. And it's called Write and Discuss. So what is that? Well, basically, it's guiding your students to create sentences in the target language. And then as they're formed, you're going to write them either projecting them on a board or writing them directly on your board, and then students copy them down. And I love Write and Discuss because it's great for reviewing content in class. It could be a story, a movie talk, picture talk, a reading, a special person interview, a novel chapter, a discussion you had with your class, or just about anything. It doesn't matter, but it is a great review activity. It can also be an extension of a previous activity by writing a new ending to a story, a reading, or a movie talk, or having the kids write what might happen before the story begins or after it ends. Can also make a side story where you can take a character, maybe a minor character, or even the main character, and talk about something else that didn't happen in the story but could have been a side story. It just branches off from the main story. There are just so many different possibilities when it comes to write and discuss. I also love to use it as a simple activity to teach writing, especially in level 1 before they actually start writing. I like to have them, we go through the process of writing a story together, and as we're doing it, I'm telling them the steps of writing a story. So I'm going to start with questions like, and I do my prompts in the target language. In level 1, I'll probably do my explaining in English, but at least my prompts will be in the target language. And I'll start with saying, first we need to come up with a character. So let's get some ideas for a character. Once we solidify our character, we write that sentence down. Then I talk about, okay, we need to describe this character. So what are they like? And we get some ideas. I'll write the information down, and then they're going to copy. I always let them know when we're doing it that they don't copy down the sentence until I put the punctuation on the sentence, because I might want to change the sentence before I'm finished. I don't want them writing and having to erase or cross out. So we'll do that. Character. Then I'll say, okay, now that we have our character established, we need to give it a problem. Let's hear some ideas for problems. When we decide what the problem is, we'll write that down. Then we'll take the time to elaborate that problem. Then I say the next step is they've got to go or do something to try to fix that problem, but they fail at it. So let's work through that. And then next they go somewhere or do something to try to fix the problem, and this time they solve it. So they're learning while we're doing this how to create a story, how to get more words, how to describe characters, how to move from point A to point B to point C. So I love that also, to use write and discuss in that way to help them. I'll also point out any particular grammar or spelling issues that might come up while we're doing this write and discuss. I'm not going into full lectures about spelling or grammar, but I'm going to point out any key things that might be going on here. Like in Spanish and French, the adjectives generally go behind the noun, or that this is a weird spelling, that we don't have K's in Spanish. K's are only used for foreign words entered into Spanish. And so how do we spell the K sound in front of all the vowels in Spanish? So you've got C-A, but then it's Q-U-E, and then it's Q-U-I, and then it's C-O, and then it's C-U. That's how we spell the K sound in Spanish. So just something really quick like that to kind of alert them. And obviously, they're not going to remember any of those little grammar tips or spelling tips when you only do it one time. But over the course of the year, as you're pointing out the same ones, the same grammar things, they're going to start to sink in with them. Plus, they're getting lots of comprehensible input in context so they can see how everything works. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. I just shrunk my head. Fix that a little bit there. Okay. So keep that in mind. If you have any questions or comments as we go along, please feel free to put them in the chat. Let us know. And another reason why I love write and discuss is because we can repurpose a lot of different activities with it. So instead of writing by hand on your board, you can type it up and then you can use it for other activities later on. And we'll talk more about that at the end today. But you can use that. If you just write it on your board, you're going to have to either take a picture of it and copy it onto a computer, or you're going to have to copy it from a computer before you erase it. I like to type it directly in the computer. I make my font really big, like 20 or 24, so all the kids can see it. But at least I have a digital copy, and I can use it for other things that we'll talk about. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about how we can do write and discuss. One of my students is watching from our track meet, and he says, I like to make my font really big too. Thank you, Jeremiah. So what I love about this as well is that it takes little to no prep to do the write and discuss. So you don't have to think about it, plan it, or do anything like that. You just have to do it. So you get your laptop out, you open up a Google Doc or a Word doc, you increase that font size to a really big size, and then tell your students what their role is in this. Are we going to review a story? or a reading? Are we going to write a summary of a novel chapter? I love using it for that to help them review the novel chapters, but then they also have a concrete record of it. Are we going to co-create a story together so they can see how they write their own stories in quick writes? Whatever you're going to do, just let them know what you're going to be doing with them. And then you start asking leading questions. That's how you get them to go in there. So like I said, if we're doing a character, I might say, necesitamos un personaje. ¿Qué tipo de personaje quieren ustedes? Un animal, una persona, una cosa. So for those who don't speak Spanish, I said, we need to have a character. What kind of character do we want? Do we want a person, a thing, or an animal to get them started? Then I can ask them, okay, how old is this character? What do they look like? Are they big? Are they small? What's their name? Where do they live? All of these things I'm asking leading questions to develop. If we're reviewing a story or reading or a text of some kind, a movie talk, I can lead them through that. I can say, so, en capítulo 1, ¿qué pasó primero? In chapter 1, what happened first? We want to know all of that and start going through. Okay, what happened to this character? What happened to that character? What happened next? How did they feel? And walk them through the important parts of the story, the reading, the chapter. Okay? And then as you go along, you're going to listen to your answers and you're going to allow as many students to participate as possible. So before you write down that sentence, you're going to listen to all the answers and then get a good whole sentence that you can combine all of the kids' answers so it feels like everybody is participating in there. And even if kids don't answer, I've got like a class answer I heard from a lot of people. I might go to individual students and ask maybe 3 or 4, maybe 5 other students what their ideas are. There might be the quieter students who don't want to, actively participate, or their voice never gets heard. So I'll ask them, so what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? And then I can incorporate pieces from their answers along with the class answer to come up with an answer that we actually put on the board. In this way, I can hear from everybody. Everybody gets an opportunity to be heard. When you have your ideas, when you get the answers from the kids, your job is to put them into a coherent sentence. And then once you put the punctuation on the sentence, that means you're done with that sentence, and the students can then copy them down into their notebooks. And you want to go slowly through this process. You don't want your students to get frustrated. They can't handwrite as fast as you can type. So I usually write a few sentences and then pause to let them catch up. And while I'm pausing, I may ask some follow-up questions that don't require a new sentence, but just kind of reviews what we already have. You can also have your students type out the story on their devices if they're one-to-one. But if you do this, I teach them how to type in the target language. I don't want them to leave out all the special characters, the accent marks, the special punctuation that your language may have. So I show them how to change their keyboards over to the target language keyboard. I'm only familiar with 3 of them, the Spanish, the French, and the German. So with Spanish, I usually have them do the international or Spain form because I know where the letters are that way. They use the same letter format as English. It's just the punctuation changes, and it's not hugely different. So it's the easiest one for kids to learn. For French, oh my gosh, I stay away from the French keyboard, and I work with the Canadian French one because the Canadian French one, again, uses the English letters, and it just has some special keys for the other letters. The French one places letters in different places, and it's a whole different ball game. The German one is quite simple to learn. The letters are in the same spot as the English letters, except the Z and the Y are reversed because the Y is not used as much as the Z in German. So just the Y and the Z are flipped, and then it's easy to find the umlauted letters. So that's what I suggest when they do that. So if you're going to have them type it, then show them how to actually type authentically in the language. Show them where all the special characters are. Show them where the differences are. Show them how to change their keyboard into the target language and then how to change it back so they're not stuck in that. And if you're not sure how to do that, because I don't teach those alt number keys, I didn't do that when I was a kid in language class, and it's frustrating for me to do it now. I'm a typist. I learned how to type, so I teach them actually how to type. So do that. If you're not familiar how to do that, just Google how to change the language keyboard over for the device they're on. Is it a Chromebook? Is it an iPad? Is it a Mac? Is it a Windows computer? So you can look it up, and then it will tell you the instructions because they change depending on software updates and such like that. And as I said, you're just going to continue asking leading questions as you go, whether you're building a story or whether you're reviewing or writing a summary or you're adding to a story. Just ask the most logical leading questions to get the kids through the whole thing. Sometimes I can get this done in one class period. Other times it takes multiple class periods. And again, if I'm trying to teach writing, some of the things that we do in my upper levels, we're going to write a friendly letter. We're going to write a formal letter. We're going to write a persuasive essay in my level 3 classes. So before we do this, we write one together in a write and discuss format so that I can walk them through the steps. So like a persuasive essay, make your claim. What are you stating? Describe that a little bit. Give your first piece of evidence. State why that applies. Give a second piece of evidence and a third piece. And I walk them through describing each step as we go through it. And this is a little bit of metacognition, but it allows them to understand the process and not just the result. If we're doing a letter, then we say, okay, this is a formal letter. How do we start a formal letter? What are appropriate openings to a formal letter, formal greetings? What are some appropriate conclusions to a letter? How do we end a letter? What kind of language do we use? What kind of language do you use in the body of the letter? Etc., etc. And then we can compare and contrast that with writing a friendly letter. This is a casual letter. What's the difference in the greeting? What's the difference in the closing? All of those different parts we can talk about, and we can compare the letters back and forth. So the next thing I want to talk about, and again, if you have any comments or questions, please feel free to put them in the comments. If we're going to do something like review what we've done in class, then I like to stop about 10 to 15 minutes towards the end of class to have us do that. I have a student keep track of that. I call them Father Time, and that's a job in my classroom. And Father Time will let me know when we have like 10 to 15 minutes. I'll look at what we're doing that day and I'll say, okay, I need you to let me know at 10 minutes or I need to let me know at 15 minutes so I know when to stop, and then we can go through and do a write and discuss to review what we've done in class so far. I have really short periods, so I don't do that a lot because my periods are about 43 to 45 minutes, and on one day a week they're like a half an hour. So I don't have a lot of time to do that always. I like to do that when we have block schedules more so. So I usually do my write and discuss the next day Or I might wait and do it on Friday and we can review the things we did all week on Friday. So for example, let's say on Monday we did a conversation. Tuesday and Wednesday we did a story in class. And then Thursday we did a reading in class. I'm not going to review all of them. I'm going to pick what piece of material that I really want them to work on. So it might be the oral story this week. So then on Friday, I'll dedicate that time to write and discuss, and we'll review the oral story. Or that week I might decide that the writing was more important. The reading. So then we'll do a write and discuss about the reading. It just depends on what I want to do. When it's novels, I generally do it when we finish the chapter. So we just finished chapter 1. We're going to stop wherever we are, and we're going to start doing a review of that chapter. And then we go on to chapter 2. Or sometimes, especially with a shorter novel, I may go until the end of the novel and then go back, and as a review, we will review chapter 1. What happened in chapter 1? What happened in chapter 2? What happened in chapter 3? All the way through. But I like to do a write and discuss at least once every other week to give them some tangible product of what we're doing in class instead of just having them do worksheets. And the whole point of it really doesn't matter when you do them. It's just that you do them and that you do them regularly. They're not just a thing that you throw in, a couple times a year. It's something that you do regularly and form a habit of it. Next, let's talk about our next steps. Once you've completed your write and discuss with your class, there's so many things that you can do to extend the activity. You can have students take their written copy home, read it and translate it for a family member. And this is awesome because it's already a familiar text. So rereading, one of the key things for reading is repetition. We want them to be able to reread things. And this is a great way to get them to reread something. Second, it shows off to the family member what the student's doing in class. Parents are always wondering, what did you do in class today? And this is one way that the kids can show it. And it also gives confidence to students because we've already read it. We came up with it in class. They should be very familiar with everything. And so they have the confidence to be able to teach and talk about the information with their parents. Nancy says, I love your videos. I'm a substitute teacher. I wish more teachers taught like you. Thank you so much, Nancy. Now, also, simply retelling a story is low-level Bloom's taxonomy. We don't want them to do that. That's just application or knowledge, being able to remember what happened. But having students create and write what happens before or after the story ending is at the top of Bloom's. Why? Because it's creation. They're creating something new. They're taking the familiar and they're making something new with it. So that's high brain level. So have them do that instead of just retelling other stories. And similar to what happens before or after a story, you can have them change the ending that they were on. So we did this write and discuss, regardless of whether it was a review of a story, a text, a novel chapter, have them change the ending of that so that they can show their creativity and use higher order thinking skills to get that done. Another great extension activity is to give them a copy of another class's Write and Discuss. Excuse me. And it doesn't matter if it's a review or it's a class-created story. The point here, you want them to compare and contrast the two. So they did a Write and Discuss maybe yesterday, and then today you're going to post up on the board the Write and Discuss from another class, and then they can make a list of things that are the same and things that are different about each one. Again, this is another higher order thinking activities. Another great go-to activity is a sentence scramble. So you can take your Write and Discuss, cut the sentences into strips, or put them on like digitally on strips, and then kids can put them back into order in small groups. It's another great way to get students to reread the text without just telling them to reread it. And one of the ways I like to do this is using a Google Sheets. Not Google Sheets, Google Slides. So you can go ahead and you can take a strip, so you go into Google Slides, you create a blank slide, and you make text blocks for each of the sentences, and then scramble them around on the slide, and then give kids a copy. They make a copy of each of the slide, so every student has their own copy, and then they can drag and drop the sentences right along the way. So, and put them in the proper order, and then they can submit that back to you. So you have now a Google slide with maybe 10 sentences all in chronological order. So that's another great way for that to work. And if you have any other ideas on how to extend this activity, please share with us in the comments. Even if you're watching the replay, I do check the comments back, so please go ahead and put that in the replay comments, and I will check back with you and we can share some more ideas. Pro tips. As you do your Write and Discuss, here's some pro tips to keep in mind. You want to go slowly. Remember, most of your students are writing by hand, and they cannot write as fast as you can type. Plus, there's no rush to finish this activity. They're getting comprehensible input, and they need it to absorb in their brains. If you're going too fast, that's not going to help them get there. So take your time and milk the activity. And if you don't finish at the end of the period, there's always another day that you can use. Another pro tip, add dialogue. Teaching kids how to write dialogue and include dialogue is a really useful skill. So, first of all, it adds more character to your stories, to your writing, because characters are interacting with each other. Second, it shows how to write dialogue in a second language. In Spanish, for example, it's very different than in English. Dialogue is introduced by a colon and a long dash. And then if it's the end of the paragraph, there's no end punctuation, there's no end quote. But if there's something that continues afterwards, then you put another long dash to separate dialogue from regular text. That's important for them to know. And then on top of that, they're learning how to manipulate verbs, because usually dialogue is in first and second persons, so they're getting practice with that, because stories are usually told, and retells and reviews of things are usually told in the third person, but dialogue is usually in first and second person. So they're getting practice with different verb forms. You also want to be sure to include short, medium, and long sentences. A lot of teachers tell me that their students only write short, choppy sentences. And the reason that is that's because most of the time, that's all they're using in their classroom. And we need to use short, choppy sentences to make it comprehensible for our slower processors. But we also need to give them something to grow on. So we need medium and longer sentences to expose them. So they're hearing them. They may not fully understand them because they're not ready yet, but they're being exposed to them so that when they are ready, those medium and longer sentences become comprehensible. Now, your medium and long sentences cannot be all brand new information that's necessary for the story. You're going to lose those slower processors. So you build. Think how children's stories are built. So we're going to say, there is a boy. His name is Bob. Now here's my medium sentence. There is a boy named Bob. Long sentence. There is a boy whose name is Bob. So you have my short, my medium, and my long sentence. In my medium and my long sentence, there's no new information, but it's showing kids who are ready for that how you build those sentences. So you want to make sure that you include short, medium, and long sentences in there, and that your medium and your longer sentences are repetitions of your shorter sentences. And lastly, we talked about this a little bit before. Point out any special features of the target language as you go, especially if they do something different than we do in English or whatever the native language of the class is. For example, in German, you point out that all nouns are capitalized in German regardless of if they're a proper noun or not, or if they're the first word of a sentence or not. In Spanish, I'll say we don't capitalize nationalities and religions like we do in English, or languages too. In the Latin-based languages, adjectives generally follow the verbs. In German, they precede the nouns. I said verbs before, I meant nouns. They precede the nouns in German just like they do in English. So point out some of these. If there's a morpheme that gets used a lot, like in Spanish, mente, or in German, lich, you can tell them that that's equivalent to ly in English to help kids recognize words when they see that word with mente at the end, or to be able to create new words adding the mente or the lich to the back of the word. Anything like that, special spelling things, anything that's unique to your language to point out. Again, this is not a grammar or spelling lesson, but it's just a quick little note as you go along, and it helps kids process the language. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about repurposing. I told you that's one of the great things about this activity, that you can use it for so many other things, especially if you make a digital copy. So, one of the things you can do is if you type it up, you'll have the digital copy and you can repurpose it in so many different ways. You can share it right away with any students who are absent, so they have a text that they can read and be familiar with in case you use it the next day in class. I love doing it this way. It's so much easier than them missing the day. At least they're not losing the complete day. I'll just go ahead, make it a Google Doc, give a share link, and then just send it out to my absent students so they can have it. Or I can make it available in my LMS, my learning management system, and have everybody be able to access it. You can also print out multiple copies and either laminate them or put them in those sheet protectors, and they can be examples of things you can add for your class library that kids can have some additional reading material. Lots of times, even when you get simple novels, the novels are outside of the student's comprehension level. Since these have been used in class and created by classmates, it's a great way to make them reread again, but it's usually something very familiar to them. So you can either just have like a stack of these already laminated or in those screen protectors, or you can make like a little anthology book, put it in a binder in the sheet protectors, and you can put that in there, and then a kid can read that during silent reading. You can also use them for a source for running dictation. This is a great activity to get your students up and running while using the language. What this is I will find, let's say, I'm going to do 25 words. So I will take my story, I will count out 25 words and cut the story. Then I get another 25 words and cut the story. Then another 25 words, cut the story. So I cut for about 4 or 5 groups. I will label each 25 words by number so they know group 1 has 1, group 2 has 2, group 3 has 3, etc. I will then tape these on the outside of my classroom in the hallway, and then in groups, they decide one kid who's going to be the scribe. They don't leave the classroom ever. They sit at the desk, and they're going to copy down the information. Then one teammate at a time will go out, find their 25-word collection, read it, remember as much of it as possible, run back to the classroom, and tell the scribe what to write down. When they come back in, the next person in their team will run out and get the next portion of it. It's like a relay game. The rules are the scribe can never go out. They cannot take the story and bring it back. They cannot take a picture of the story and bring it back. And only one team member can be out looking at the story at a time. So it works really, really well that way. And then the first class or the first group to get it letter for letter, spelling for spelling, word for word correct wins. So it's a fun activity, gets kids practicing spelling, gets practicing punctuation, and practicing the language as they're running around the classroom. So they like to do that. You can also take your writing discusses and save them for future assessments. So obviously you can't use them for the current year because, they were done in the classroom. But you can make assessments with them and use them for another school year. And that saves a lot of time along the way. You can also take them and scaffold them for your lower readers. And using Lori Clark's and Michelle Whaley's embedded reading. So you can take the longer one that you wrote as a class and then make multiple versions starting out with just the bare essentials of the story and slowly building the story back up to the original. Staple that together, and now you have a series of embedded readings to scaffold that bigger one for your slower processors. And one of my favorite things to do with the write and discusses is gather them all together and then make a class anthology at the end so that the students can see the body of their work at the end. And you might even make a copy for each student so they have something to take with them at the end of the class, kind of like a little memento of all the things that they wrote. It's a fun little activity to do. And those are just some of the ideas to repurpose. There are so many other ideas, and if you have something special that you do with repurposing these or have an idea, please share them in the comments so that we can all learn from that. So there you have it. That is my ideas on write and discuss. If you found this useful, I would greatly appreciate if you can like and subscribe. Share this with other teachers to let them know about the channel. Let them know the things that they can learn watching us and participating with us. I know last week I misspoke and said we were going to do repetition this week. I got my dates mixed up. But next week we're going to be talking about how repetition is important to comprehensible input. So we'll be here at the same time, same channel, 5 o'clock Pacific time on Monday. And I hope to see you all then. Until then, have a great week, and I will talk to you next week. Goodbye, everybody.